Silent prayer. The first snow of December fell silently outside St. Mary's Cathedral, each flake catching the colored light that streamed through the ancient stained glass windows. The church stood quiet in the early evening, its stone walls holding the gentle warmth of hundreds of flickering candles. The scent of pine and old wood filled the air, mixed with the faint sweetness of the white lilies that adorned the altar. David Harrison sat alone in the third pew from the back, his hands folded in his lap, his eyes fixed on the simple wooden cross above the altar. He had not expected to find himself here tonight. The board meeting had run late, as they always did in December, filled with year-end reports and plans for the new fiscal year. But something had drawn him to this place, perhaps the weight of another lonely evening in his empty penthouse, or maybe a Christmas season that seemed to amplify the silence in his life. He loosened his navy wool scarf and let his shoulders relax for the first time in weeks. The cathedral offered something his corporate world could not: peace, and the kind of silence that actually comforted rather than reminded him of what was missing. The sound of small footsteps on the stone floor drew his attention. A little girl in a deep red velvet dress was walking slowly up the center aisle, her golden curls bouncing gently with each step. She moved with the careful precision of a child who had been taught to be quiet in church, but her eyes wandered with natural curiosity, taking in the soaring arches and the jeweled light from the windows above. David recognized her immediately. It was Sophie, the little girl from the cafe, the one who had shared his table with Emma just a few weeks ago. But something was different now. She was alone, and there was a solemnity in her small face that hadn't been there before. She stopped beside his pew and looked up at him with those same warm brown eyes, though now they seemed larger somehow, more serious. "Mr. David," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the vast space. "Is that really you?" "Hello, Sophie," David said gently, sliding over to make room for her. "What are you doing here all by yourself?" Sophie climbed up beside him, smoothing her dress carefully before folding her hands just as he had done. "Miss Emma brought me," she said, glancing toward the back of the church. "She's lighting a candle for my mama. I'm supposed to wait here and be good." David followed her gaze and saw Emma near the side chapel, her silhouette illuminated by the warm glow of votive candles. She was dressed in a soft blue dress, her blonde hair caught in a simple bun, and she moved with the same gentle grace he remembered from their morning at the cafe. "Your mama?" David asked carefully, sensing there was more to the story. Sophie nodded, her small fingers fidgeting with the ribbon on her dress. "Mama went to heaven last month," she said matter-of-factly, though her voice wavered slightly. "Miss Emma says lighting candles helps us remember the people we love. Do you think that's true?" David felt his chest tighten. He had lost his own parents years ago, and while the pain had softened with time, he remembered the weight of that first Christmas without them. But for a child Sophie's age to face such loss, it seemed unbearably unfair. "I think Emma is very wise," he said softly. "And I think your mama would be proud of what a brave little girl you are." Sophie leaned against the wooden pew, her legs swinging slightly. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the candles flicker and listening to the soft echo of footsteps as other visitors moved quietly through the cathedral. "Mr. David." Sophie's voice was even smaller now, almost lost in the vastness of the church. "Yes, sweetheart, I don't have a papa," she said, the words coming out in a rush, as if she had been holding them back for a long time. "Mama said he went away before I was born, and now she's gone too, and it's just me and Miss Emma, but she's not my family, not really." David turned to face her fully, seeing the mixture of sadness and hope in her young eyes. "Emma seems to care about you very much," he said. "She does," Sophie agreed quickly. "She reads me stories and makes me pancakes that look like butterflies, and she never gets mad when I have bad dreams." "But," she trailed off, looking down at her hands. "But what, Sophie?" When she looked up at him again, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "All the other kids at school have mamas and papas, or at least one of them. And when they talk about what they're getting for Christmas or where they're going for vacation, I don't know what to say because it's just me." The simple honesty of her words hit David harder than any business presentation or boardroom confrontation ever had. He saw himself reflected in her loneliness, the way she tried to be brave while carrying a burden too heavy for such small shoulders. "Can I tell you a secret?" David said, leaning down so they were at eye level. Sophie nodded eagerly. I don't have a family either, he admitted. My parents died when I was grown up, and I never got married or had children of my own. So I understand how quiet the world can feel sometimes. Sophie studied his face with the intense focus that children reserve for adults who speak to them as equals. Are you lonely too? She asked. Sometimes, David said honestly. Especially during Christmas. Sophie was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Then, with the sudden decisiveness that only children possess, she slipped off the pew and stood in front of him, placing her small hands on his knees. Mr. David, she said, her voice trembling with emotion and hope, I don't have a papa, and you don't have a little girl. Maybe we could be a family. Can you be my daddy forever? Please. The question hung in the air between them like a prayer itself. David felt something shift in his chest, a warmth he hadn't experienced in years spreading through him. Looking into Sophie's hopeful face, he saw not just a lonely child, but a chance at the kind of love he had convinced himself he didn't need. Sophie, he said gently, that's a very important question. What does Emma think about all this? As if summoned by her name, Emma appeared at the end of their pew, her cheeks flushed from the cold and her eyes bright with unshed tears. She had clearly heard at least part of their conversation. Emma, Sophie turned to her with excitement. Mr. David is lonely too, just like us. And I asked him to be my daddy, and maybe we could all be a family together. Emma looked between Sophie and David, her expression a mixture of surprise, embarrassment, and something that might have been hope. Sophie, sweetheart, you can't just ask someone to. Actually, David interrupted, standing slowly and extending his hand to Emma, I think Sophie might be the wisest person in this entire cathedral tonight. Emma took his hand, her touch warm and steady. David, you don't have to. I know I don't have to, he said quietly. But maybe I want to. Maybe we all deserve a chance at the kind of family we choose for ourselves. Sophie clapped her hands together in delight, then threw her arms around both of them, trying to encompass them in her small embrace. We're going to be the best family ever, she declared with absolute certainty. Standing there in the cathedral, surrounded by candlelight and the gentle fall of snow. Outside, David felt something he had been missing for years. The warm weight of belonging, the quiet joy of being exactly where he was meant to be. The three of them walked out of the cathedral together, Sophie between them, chattering excitedly about Christmas morning and butterfly pancakes. Behind them, the candles continued to flicker in the gentle darkness, like small prayers answered by love.